Hey everybody, welcome to, I guess you could say, take two, basically, hopefully the second and last takeoff to do with this, of the monthly opinions, the September 2013 edition of the monthly opinions, of my monthly opinions on the Sonic the Hedgehog comic book and franchise. And to say that the past 2 years, as I and many have talked about, to say the past 2 years, that past 2 years of story and all that me and other fans have talked about has kind of had its criticisms would be an understatement, especially with the recent release to subscribers and recently into comic book shops of 252. We could pretty much say that the past 2 years has been kind of up and down, if you will. 252 has kind of gotten a mixed reaction. I mean, a lot of fans pretty much know why it's happening. Pretty much kind of get where Ian Flynn's going with the story, and then of course there's some fans that don't like what's going on and don't like how it's come about. I mean, in fact, you have some fans that have said, "Hey, look," and believe it or not, this is actually from both sides too. Fans that like 252, as well as fans that don't like it. There have been some on both sides that have come together to agree that the past 2 years has become nothing more than a waste. That basically Ian Flynn took up everybody's time for no reason because there's no real payoff. However, again, there are some fans that will say, "Hey, you just got to give it a chance. We might get that payoff before you know it," and that is true. We just got to hold off and see what Countdown to Chaos gives us in the next 4 months. But you can kind of understand where some kind of have that reaction to where to where the past 2 years have now been made meaningless. It's like nothing really matters. That the past 2 years don't really matter. That none of that really counts now because we're starting over. Well, not necessarily starting over. The storyline is pretty much continuing, sort of off of the ending of 251. You got to remember, at the ending of 251, Sonic was trying to do what Mega Man did, and that's create chaos control again to restore the world and kind of get back to where they left off. But Eggman being desperate, and this is the one thing I will give Ian credit for, he's basically made Eggman a villain that's so obsessed with conquering the world that if he can't have the world, that he's the kind of villain that's like, "Hey, if I can't have the world, nobody can." And I like that. I'll give him that credit for doing that because basically at the ending of 251, and this is spoilers for anybody that hasn't read the issue yet, but I'm pretty sure you've seen screen grabs of it anyway, or scans anyway. Basically, as Sonic's doing the chaos control and trying to basically restore the planet and and everything back to normal and get back to where they left off, Eggman basically fires a weapon right at the same time and shatters not just Sonic's concentration, but shatters the chaos control to where he basically causes the world to kind of mix together into two different timelines, where he basically causes two different realities and timelines to mix into one, thus giving us what we're going to get next month, and that is the start of Countdown to Chaos and what we had gotten basically a glimpse of in 252. So, again, I'll give Ian credit for making Eggman that way, but basically that's why a lot of fans are saying, "Hey, let's hold off on your judgment. We don't know what's going to happen next because just because we got a glimpse of it in 252 doesn't mean we won't know the whole story until Countdown to Chaos comes around." And so, yeah. Pretty much, a lot of people are kind of mixed right now with 252, as well as mixed with the Countdown to Chaos upcoming in the next few months. So I kind of understand that. I kind of understand that reaction, and I kind of. And I can kind of, again, I can kind of understand that reaction. But in my opinion, as far as the redesigns goes, as far as the redesigns, personally, in my opinion, I really don't have a problem with them. I mean, let's not forget, ladies and gentlemen, let's not forget, even when Sat AM was around, or was being aired, and you can, if you have the box set, if you have the complete series set, if you have the complete series set, if you can get, or if you can gain, or if you have Netflix, or if you have Netflix, you can pretty much look at it like this. You can pretty much look at it like this. In the pilot episode, Heads or Tails, you had Pink Sally with her reddish-brown strand of hair, if you will, in the middle. The episode after that, which I remember being Supersonic, she had the design we all know, but with lighter brown, reddish hair. And then the second season came around, her coloring was darker all the way around, and she had the vest, and she had pupils in her eyes. She had pupils in her eyes. So those were some redesigns there. The same with Antoine and Rotor. One season they had two different designs, one for the pilot, one for the first season. In the second season they got complete overhauls in design. Bunny Rabbit, her coloring got darker, and then about the third episode or so, boom. Well, actually not the third episode, fourth episode or so, boom, she got pupils in her eyes. So again, the characters have gone through redesigns even with Sat AM. And then take a look at the comic. When Sally came around, she had what? Originally, she was orange with yellow hair, then she went to the pink, black hair, and then she went to the Sat AM design of season 1 with the eye pupils from season 2. And then she went to the vest later on, a few issues later. Later, if you will. So it's not the first time she's had a redesign. Then you take a look at Bunny. Bunny was pretty much the same for a while. Then they did the school thing where she started to go with the long hair a little bit, like with the braids, and where she went with the braids for a while, and she kind of with the bangs. Actually, with the bangs, I should say that she did the Daisy Duke stuff for a while. Then later on, she did the long hair with the cowgirl outfit, and then Rotor, he got his jacket and stuff, and Sally got her long hair. You kind of get the idea. You kind of get the idea that this is not the first time characters have had redesigns in the comics. But so I just don't get what the big deal is. Big deal is, except for maybe the fact that people don't really have a problem with the redesigns. It's more along the lines of the personality. Because you see, when you took a look at the King Max, if you will, not only was he retconned to look younger and look younger and healthier, but more along the lines of a Segified version of what he was in Sat AM. But pretty much his personality had changed as well. He wasn't as Sonic, but it wasn't as mean and jerky as he was previously. He was nicer and more down to earth. And that's basically what fans pretty much are fearing could happen with the other characters. That there's either going to be a slight tweak in the personalities, or the personalities are going to get overhauls. From what I can understand, and this is basically from what I'm understanding, Ian Flynn has said Sally will still be Sally, Bunny would still be Bunny, Rotor would still be Rotor, Antoine would still be Antoine. So I'm going by his word that the characters will pretty much stay the same. They're just going to have new looks. If they have a tweak here and there, then that's fine. You need to tweak them somehow, but not much. You need to tweak personalities at times somehow, but not much. But again, though, it's more along the lines. I think that's what they fear. That's what they're afraid of the most. It's not just the redesigns. It's mostly the personalities. So I can understand that. But when I take a look at the King Max character, even before I guess you could say the retcon, if you will, or the semi-retcon, you have to understand basically storyline-wise why that character became the way he was. Put through all the crap that he had been put through, like being put in the void, nearly killed, being paralyzed, having to basically be forced to step down and have his son step up, because he was poisoned, and going through all that crap, if you will, would definitely change you, and sometimes not for the better. And from a reality standpoint, that is true. If you go through a lot of crap, sometimes it'll either change you for the better or it won't. And in this case, before this issue, and before worlds collide and all that, it didn't really help him at all. It didn't. So, that's pretty much why I feel the character was written the way he was before this issue. Pretty much the reason he was written the way he was. But again, I can understand the real fear is not the redesigns. People will get over those. It's the personalities. And when I look at Countdown to Chaos, in my opinion, I'm thinking that the representatives, the Anthony and Cindy individuals that represent Sega, that are always mentioned in the credits of the issues, I'm thinking they're getting a first-class education as to what made the comic so successful. And it's not just the fact that it's based on the Sonic video game franchise, it's the fact that it had more variety. It didn't just depend on Sonic and Tails and other game characters. That it actually depended, that it actually didn't, again, it didn't just depend on them, but it also worked in different elements of the franchise, especially the non-game elements that help give more leeway and freedom to what could be done in the book. And I'm thinking, these two representatives are getting a first-class education on that, and they're kind of reporting back to Sega saying, hey, look, this is why these characters are always here. It's because it's more variety, and more can be done with these characters than can be done if you, just focused on the game characters. And focusing on the game characters isn't a bad thing, because that's pretty much, they're pretty much from the game, because, them being from the games and having stories focused on them would attract new readers and stuff. I give it that. But again, like I said, and this is my opinion, those representatives are getting a first-class education, and by reporting back to Sega and saying, probably telling them about what they've learned, and probably telling them why the comic's been successful for as long as it's been around, and it's been successful as it has been for the past 20 years, is due to the different varieties, even from the non-game portions of the franchise. And like for example, when with the whole Sonic Sally relationship deal, nobody knows exactly what where that's going to stand, after Countdown to Chaos. No one's going to kind of know where that stands. Whether they're going to be back together, whether they're going to have to start over, nobody really knows. Nobody even knows if Bunny and Antoine are going to be married. But as far as Sonic and Sally go, one of the things I think that these representatives at Sega are getting a first-class education on, and this is why I believe Countdown to Chaos is focusing on bringing the Freedom Fighters back together, one of the things they're getting an education on is the fact that Sonic and Sally, that are one of the more popular pairings out of the book, especially whether it's as a couple, an on and off couple, or just as best buds, they're a pairing that fans are attracted to and fans know more about than they do anything else. Any other pairing or so in the comic, if not in the entire franchise. And I think, again, these two representatives are getting that first-class education on it, and they're reporting back to Sega, letting them know why. And I know there's a lot of Sonic gaming fans that will pretty much feel, that would pretty much rather have Sonic and Amy as a couple and everything. But again, this is where Sally comes in. See, Sally is that default factor, is basically the default factor, if you will. You see, as much as fans would like to see Sonic with Amy, or Sonic with Blaze, or Sonic with Rouge, or heck, even Sonic with Elise, as crazy as that sounds, The truth is, it can't be done because they're in-game characters. And as much as fans would like to see Sega say, hey, let's make them an official couple, it would basically, by doing so, it would be steering away from the number one rule, from one of the top rules, and that is Sonic cannot have a steady relationship, and basically it would steer away from Sonic's personality of being a free spirit. Basically being able to run around, do what he wants, how he wants, without being held down. And that is why Sega, and I think the representatives, when they report back to them, are always okay with Sonic being with Sally. Especially when, especially when you take a look at the Saturday M cartoon, they could have jumped in at any time and said, no, we're not letting this happen. The reason they let it happen on and off, the reason they let it happen in Saturday M, and the reason they're letting it happen in the comics, is because it's an on and off deal. You can turn the relationship on, let it go for as long as you want, and then you can turn it off. No big deal. Sega knows that. Because they also know, and I'm not trying to hate on any Sonic Amy fans out there, but Sega also knows that if they were to try the same thing with Sonic and Amy, fans would want them to officially be together, and that's it. But it can't happen. Same thing with Blaze. They want them to officially be together, and that's it. But it can't happen. Because it would be steering away from that personality of Sonic's of being a free spirit, being able to do what he wants. And that's why they always put him with Sally. Because pretty much she's the kind of character that you can turn the relationship on and off, and he can still be able to be that free spirit. No matter what happens. He can still be the free spirit. And I know some people find that a little confusing. Kind of find that a little confusing, or a little like, well, what do you mean? Kind of deal. Well, let me give you an example. It's going to be a strange comparison, but here's a strange comparison but here it is. You have the Mario Bros. You have the Mario franchise. And pretty much everybody knows in the Mario franchise, and Nintendo knows this. Nintendo, more than anybody, knows this. Pretty much you have Luigi and Daisy as a pairing, and you have Mario and Peach as a pairing. How is this acknowledged? In the video games. Like, for example, Mario Super Sluggers. One of Mario's tag team buddies. One of Mario's buddies that he can do tag team moves with in Super Sluggers is Peach. Same with Luigi. Luigi, one of his tag team partners he can do double team moves with is Daisy. And the reason for this is because Nintendo acknowledges that fans see them as a pairing. In fact, you take a look at Mario Kart Wii and you go through the Daisy circuit or the Daisy raceway, and there's a statue of Daisy and Luigi dancing, if you will. So Nintendo acknowledges that. They acknowledge it, but they don't shove it down our throats. They don't shove it in our faces. They don't come out and officially say, but they don't, again, they don't shove it down our throats. They don't shove it down our faces. And they, most importantly, don't come out and say, hey, the couple, these two are separate couples that are steady in steady relationships together. And here's why. Because it would be deferring away from what made Mario and Luigi who they are, and basically steering away from what makes Peach and Daisy who they are. I mean, yes, there's no doubt people would like to get an official statement from Nintendo one of these days saying, okay, in this upcoming game or in this upcoming comic or maybe even movie, we're going to make them an item. They know that. We're going to make these four two separate items officially, and they're going to be steady relationships together. And every story, in every game with a story, is going to focus on them being together. Nintendo knows fans want that. And that is why you always see these little Easter eggs, if you will, basically acknowledging that fans realize, that the parents, the couples, if you will, but they're not steady couples. They're not official couples just yet. They're not like steady relationship couples. They're more like on and off kind of deal. More like, basically they're kind of like on that borderline of, it could happen, cannot happen kind of deal. And again, the reason, just like with Sega, the reason Nintendo doesn't do it is because it would be deferring away from who the characters are. You take a look at Birdo and Yoshi. You might say, well, they're a relationship, they're in a couple. Yeah, but, and again, just like with Daisy and Luigi, they're a buddy-buddy thing. Obviously, there is a relationship there with them. But again, just like with Mario and Peach and Daisy and Luigi and Daisy, it's not shoved down our throats, and it's not made official of them being a pair together or being in a steady relationship, because it would be just deferring away from who the characters are. And again, as strange as a comparison that is, it's true. Same thing with Sega. With Sonic, Sega with Sonic. If they wanted to put Sonic with Amy, then that's their decision, officially. They wanted to do that. If they wanted to put them together with Blaze, that's the decision to do it officially. But they don't, because they'll be deferring away from who Sonic is, personality-wise. And believe it or not, be deferring away from who Amy is and who Blaze is. So that's why they don't do it. They don't want to change the personality aspect of the characters. Which is why you're going to always have something like Sonic and Sally together as a pairing, because it doesn't really defer that much away from Sonic's personality. Nor does it defer away from from the personality that Sally has. That is why you always have those two in an on and off relationship, because that relationship doesn't defer the personalities away, doesn't defer them from the personalities that made them who they are. That is true, it's fact. And that is why, in my opinion, depending on what happens in and after Countdown to Chaos, in my opinion, that's why we're either going to have an on and off relationship again between Sonic and Sally, or we're just going to have it starting over again, from scratch. To where they kind of take it step by step, if that happens. And that's just my opinion on it, But that's how I see it. That's why you always have, Sally in that position. Now getting back to the past, to this whole situation with Ian Flynn and his story arc, in my opinion, I've said this before and I'll say it again, whether I get along with the guy or not, whether I have personal difference, whether I or anybody else gets along with the guy or not, or whether myself or anybody else has a difference of opinion with him, we all can agree that he did his damnedest, and I still stick by the fact that he should have, somebody at least higher up should have given him some kind of clue to the fact that crap was going to hit the fan, and he better be prepared. That's all they needed to say. They said, hey, something's going down. We thought you might want to be prepared for that, so you might want to do something, kind of do a different story or something like that until, everything until everything cools down. That's just my personal take on it. It's just my personal take. And I know some people may or may not agree with that, but it's my personal take. But, again, it's more along the lines of, Ian Flynn, he did his damnedest. He obviously, because like I said before, in text writing, I'll provide a link down to the text of my review of 230 to 247, if you will. But to me, from about 237 and 238, and mostly around like 230, basically between issues 237 to 240 and 241, you can pretty much tell that he was on the verge. Originally his plan, in my opinion, his plan was for Sally to regain her free will, as being the first step, and then probably by 250 have her be restored to flesh and blood as the final step. That's how I look at it, in my opinion. That's how I look at it, especially when you, that's how I see it and look at it, especially when you look at issues 237 to 241, if you will, and in between. I also still believe that she had weaponized armor welded onto her body. And the reason, like I said before, you take a look, I think, at 39 or 40, and you see her. There's a big splash panel on top of 2 pages of her and Amy about to clash in battle, and you see her tail sticking out at the back on her backside. So that kind of tells me that if he had really modified her, then why is her tail sticking out still? Tells me that all he did was place weaponized armor on her. Another thing that indicates to me that, he didn't, take her apart and gut her and rebuild her like some people said Ian Flynn had him do off panel, is due to the fact, and this, again, these are just my opinions, is due to the fact that, it's due to the fact that, and this is a question I asked in the text as well, is to why would Eggman modify a power ring that would, stop her from regaining her, would basically stop her from regaining her free will like they usually do. It's because he pretty much knew, because he did not gut her, he did not rebuild her. It's pretty much a lot of people looked at. Another thing as well, I know a lot of people point out the laser cannon deal. If you take a look at the littlest detail, it's connected to her brain. It's not, her brain was not removed, it's connected to it. How else could she command it to come out? You know what I'm saying? The point is, my opinion still, and I'm sticking with it, is she had weaponized armor welded onto her. End of story. But, again, my personal opinion on the whole situation, especially with 252, I know a lot of fans, I know Ian and Archie Comics are going to have a lot of mixed reactions. I've noticed that, in my personal opinion here, I've noticed that there have been some fans that were supportive of the past 2 years, and now they're kind of like derailing from that support because they look at 252 and they're like, well, what was the point of the past 2 years kind of deal? It's like, to them it doesn't make any sense as to why you would write 2 years worth of story and then suddenly just disregard it like it never happened. And then the only way of having people remember what happened is having Nicole, which I pretty much called it and said would be the key to the whole remembrance deal, being the key, being the one that helps them remember exactly what happened in the past timeline. So, my personal opinion, I can understand the reactions, the mixed reactions that Ian and Archie Comics are going to get for the next few months. But hopefully by the start of next year, everything will be straightened out and we'll pretty much have a comic book that will not have such a divided fan base as much anymore than it had over the past 2 years. Because I can say this, from issues 225 to 247, not 230, but 225 to 247, I can say this, 225, 230 to 247, if you will, were the most divided this fan base has ever gotten. And I think that's a fact people can agree on. So, that's all I'm going to say on that, and hopefully by 2014, by the time that starts, things will be smoothed out, and we'll either be on a smoother ride, or like I said before, we'll be on a bumpier ride. And then to close out, let me just say this about Lost World. I think, even though it's a Wii U and a 3DS exclusive title, I think Lost World will be worth getting because it looks good, and it looks like it's going to expand the universe, the Sonic universe, and the franchise even more so. And I think we already see one of those demon characters, if you will, becoming a good girl, if you know what I mean. So, and you can guess who I'm talking about. So, I'd definitely check out Lost World if you ever get a chance. I know I will. But that's all I'm going to say. Thank you for watching this edition of the Monthly Opinions.